WTO, which Michelle just mentioned, was not easy. It took 15 years of hard negotiations. Before the official announcement in 2001, China had to satisfy its trading partners that it was doing enough to open the economy to international competition. The key turning point came in 1999 with the trade deal between the U.S. and China. Charlene Barshevsky was the top U.S. negotiator then. She is credited with making sure China's WTO membership came to be. Ambassador Barshevsky sat down with me recently and told me what it was like at the negotiation table.
Very intense, a little bit confrontational, very direct. Interpersonally, I think both sides maintained good relations. In other words, we separated out our personal relationship from the task of negotiating an agreement. But obviously, I represented the interests of the United States. The China side, Lung Yung-tu, for example, represented the interests of China. And so from that point of view, one can imagine there is some clashing, a lot of disagreement, a lot of vigorous debate, a lot of debate, until we could see that, you know, maybe we're not quite as far apart as we thought. Or maybe if we think about the issue a different way, we can come to agreement. Or maybe we could take the first step toward agreement and then gradually another step, another. So negotiations of this sort are very detailed, they're very complicated, a lot of moving pieces on the chessboard, and very intense.
Walk us through some of the big challenges that you had to deal with and how you overcame those challenges.
The biggest challenge was that China's economy was so vastly different in structure, in size, and in ethos than the United States and most Western economies. And the WTO is based on a view that markets and market mechanisms should govern trade, and that governments should be less involved in the commercial sphere. This was not the way China operated at the time at all. So the changes that were required to come into the WTO were so vast in relation to China's economic structure that China undertook a series of quite deep commitments. We see, of course, the outcome today. This was brilliant on China's part. That is to say, it opened its economy. It began moving toward the norms of the WTO over time, and its economic growth has intensified dramatically ever since. This is one of the great success stories of the WTO, and I think speaks to substantial courage on the part of the Chinese side to take this enormous step.
Specifically with the United States and the relationship with China, what's been the biggest disappointment, if you will, something that you wanted to see have done that did not get accomplished since those talks?
You know, I think the U.S. and China worked together well in areas of interest that overlap. I think we tend to work together pretty well in trade, pretty well in other areas, cooperation on a variety of diplomatic fronts, security fronts, and so on. But we are fundamentally very different countries. And sometimes those differences are magnified in a way that leads to unnecessary friction. So I would hope the U.S. and China could learn to better manage its differences, to not let those differences get in the way of the areas in which our interests do overlap, do coincide, and in that way build the relationship from that smaller core outwardly.
On the positive side of that question, what's been the biggest surprise on the positive side in your mind that you've seen that have exceeded your expectations since those negotiations took place?
China's growth. China's growth, which we had always anticipated would accelerate after its entry into the WTO, has surprised even most economists because the growth has been so robust and until very recently, very sustainable at a high rate. I think that's one of the remarkable features of what China has accomplished. When one considers the number of people brought out of poverty, when one considers general standards of living in China, when one considers the range of economic opportunity that is available, this is quite remarkable. I think there is no historic parallel for this kind of economic progress in, let's say, a 30 or 35-year time frame. It's really quite remarkable.
Thank you, Charlene Barshevsky, Ambassador, that is, for joining us. Now, just